I'm Leigh Brown, and this is Real Talk with Leigh Brown. Today, I'm excited to bring y'all a guest who is former Secret Service, also married to one of my high school friends, and one of the accounts you're already following on Instagram. We're going to have a really interesting conversation that covers a lot of topics, some of which are a little bit deep. So if you have your kids around, part of this episode will be talking about sexual assault. So maybe make sure little ears aren't tuned in, but really good information for those of y'all that want to move more safely in society. So I'm glad to introduce you to Scott Bryson, and I'll see you on the other side. Welcome to the show. I'm really excited that you have agreed to come on the podcast. And I know that my viewers are looking at your face thinking, he looks familiar, and they're really not sure how. And if you're a listener, this is why you need to be logged into the video version of the podcast, because you miss out on those moments of running through your mental Rolodex. So why don't you tell my audience who you are, and then I'll tell a little bit too. So you go first.
Okay. My name is Scott Bryson. I am a retired Secret Service agent. I have a podcast that I've been doing for about a year now. It's called Scott Bryson Beyond the Service. I'm also on Instagram. That platform has grown exponentially over the last year. We're at like 521,000 followers on Instagram, which is insane to me. But yeah, I'm from Cabarrus County. Went to Appalachian State University. I have a teaching degree, made the switch over to law enforcement. Was a Concord City cop for 2 years, went to the service for 25 years. I'm still working. The place I'm working at now is a really good place. They just asked me not to ever really kind of say publicly where I work, which is fine, so I don't. But I'm still in law enforcement and trying to figure out the next chapter of my life, because I've been doing this for 30 years, so I'm coming up on the end, probably sometime next year. And just trying to see what's next.
And you forgot to mention you're married to probably one of the nicest people to ever graduate from my high school. And she really is one of the sweetest people to ever live, which is a direct reflection of her incredibly sweet mother too.
Yes. Yeah, anybody out there that likes football will understand this term. I outkick my coverage. She is an amazing human being. We're high school sweethearts. We have 3 adult children. We're 3 for 3. They're all saved. They all been saved by grace, like I have and Elizabeth has, and hopefully your listeners have too. But yeah, we're 3 for 3 with the kiddos. Everybody's saved by the blood of Jesus, and they have good jobs, and they're productive members of society. So we're happy. I'm glad they take after their mama.
And since you're speaking of football, I mean, you should acknowledge you married the freaking head cheerleader. I mean, not just a football analogy, you got the head cheerleader.
Yeah, I did well.
It's the best thing ever, because I was actually having lunch with a friend who graduated a couple years ahead of me, and we were in Mount Pleasant, and we were talking about people we knew, and I'm like, well, that beautiful little store over there is owned by somebody you know. And so I told him, and he went, oh, she was always the nicest. And is her mother doing well? Her mother's so nice too. I'm like, I know, Gina's as nice as Elizabeth. And so it's a good thing in today's world. And of course, y'all know that we have to remind you that the only thing you can take to heaven is your children's souls. Right. And so that's why your children need to know Jesus. And so that's what you're going to have in the afterlife, is hopefully your family. So now that you've told us a little bit about that law enforcement background, if anybody's wondering why you recognize him, that BTS, Beyond the Service, from his podcast is in his handle, and you've watched him talk about safety, and you've seen videos with tips. I think the one that got all of my girlfriends logged into watching you was when you were talking about how to safely go to the grocery store and how to park your buggy so that you don't get trapped by one of these carjackers, because they're working parking lots all over the country. We've all seen it happen, because there's always some person in the public standing there filming it instead of intervening, because that's what we've become as a society. So why don't you start off by giving them that little tip on how to be safe at the grocery store, Scott, because it's very useful information.
Yeah, I mean, most of the things that we talk about on my channel are kind of common sense things. Sometimes they're a little unorthodox, and that one in particular got 20 something million views. And so, of course, my colleagues make fun of me and say, there's no way you load your car like that. But I mean, the point is, it's an outside the box way of thinking to protect the most vulnerable among us, which a lot of times are women loading children and groceries, right? Little toddlers and things like that. So basically, if you'll just sort of position yourself in the jamb of the door and then put the buggy on an angle, so you're basically made a triangle. And then, if you have a child, the first thing I would do is probably put the child in the car and then unload the groceries. So you're going to have to turn your back a little bit, but you're kind of rotating. You're not just blindly giving up your back, or in military terms, your six, which means your back. So you're not just going to blindly turn away and just, I kid my wife sometimes because I would get so aggravated because I'm still getting paid, I guess, to worry and see the glass half empty, which I'm not happy about. I wish I was a little bit more optimistic, but I've seen the worst in society, and she's like glass half full, and I'm like, okay, Elton John, calm down, because she just sees the world through rose-colored glasses, and sometimes I'll tease her and I'll say, you think life's like a bowl of cherries and you're just doing the backstroke and everything's great. And unfortunately, it's just not. So, I want to be very clear that we don't walk around in a perpetual state of fear. That's what the enemy wants you to do. We don't live in fear. The Bible tells us that we don't have a spirit of timidity, but we want to be lightly aware. You can have fun and enjoy life, but just have situational awareness. And one of the things that I harp on too, which we'll probably get to, is your cell phone. Your cell phone's got to get put up. For the ladies, you got to put it in your pocketbook. Dudes, put it in your pocket, whatever. Get off your phone, and just walk. If you can't get from your car to Target or Food Lion without being on your phone, you might need an intervention. And I was saying that tongue in cheek because so many of us, pretty much almost everybody, is checking a quick text or something real quick. We're always trying to multitask. Sometimes I just wish it was 1982 again and we would just park the car and do our thing and, just enjoy life a little bit.
Well, then all we needed to do was find a quarter in the couch cushions or a dime to make a phone call if you could find a working payphone. And for my young viewers and listeners, you're thinking, what craziness is that? That's how it used to be. You could find a dime and then you'd find a payphone to call somebody because you could be disconnected. But I'm glad you bring up that phone because obviously a lot of my viewers are professional realtors. And that means a lot of them are women because your average real estate agent is a medium-aged woman. Okay. And as such, in the business, we're often out with strangers. And when we're out showing property, you might be in a vacant house. They're going about their day as a solopreneur, working out of the car. And I don't ever see a realtor that's not doing this. They're having a conversation with this person and that one, and they're texting and this. They're not looking up and around. When you talk about that situational awareness, I think our profession is particularly addicted to their devices under the excuse of, but I have to. I'm working. They're not even necessarily scrolling. They're working, but they don't put it down enough to protect themselves. And of course, Realtor Safety Month is the month when we talk very carefully about people thinking, just slow it down enough to be wise. So tell them some tips for moving around in the world where we know this is often the tether to emergency resources. This is the tether to the person who knows where you are. It's your GPS and Find My Phone and all of that. So what is a way for them to think about it while they're working, while they're with strangers, but being aware at the same time?
Yeah, I think sort of sometimes, technology's great. I mean, we all carry around miniature computers in our pocket, and I love my phone too, and it can be great, but it can also be a detriment, right? And so, like, for example, I know a lot of people probably don't even know, whoever is in your contacts, your husband, your children, your mom, whatever, you might not even have their number memorized. Like, I know my wife's number and I know the kids' numbers, but I couldn't tell you my mom and dad's number, you know what I mean? Or my mother-in-law's number. I just go to my contact and hit their name. So I think it's kind of a simple idea, but, I talked about this recently when people are traveling, and I think this is a really good idea for international travel, but I think the same could be said for just day-to-day life. Get a piece of paper and write down, the top 5 or 10 most important contacts that you have, and then just laminate it. And you could just put, nobody really has a home phone anymore, like a landline, but you could put, your wife's
I
name or
do. I have
your,
a landline.
your husband. Well, see, I
I'm an
wanted
old
one.
person with a landline.
Well, I wanted one for 911 purposes, but the local establishment wanted to charge me an astronomical number, and I'm like, nah, we're good. That's aggravating. But but yeah, I think just like you could get a piece of paper and you could type out a list of, maybe your primary physician, your pastor's name, or the church phone number, or whatever, and just have that laminated and have that with you in case. Is it likely that you're going to probably have a seizure and pass out while you're grocery shopping? Probably not, but it could happen, right? And so if you're unconscious, that would be a way for someone to, because they're not going to be able to get into your phone. It's password protected. So that's one idea. There are other things too. I talked about one time. I'm trying to think how I said this. Sometimes our phones are really low on juice because maybe we've been on them all day, or we don't have access to a car charger at the moment. One of the things that I've told my family members to do is if you're down to 1 or 2%, it shouldn't get. It's kind of like your gas in your car. It shouldn't get below half a tank, but it does. And if your phone's down to 1 or 2%, then what I think is a good idea is say, hey, I'm at such and such location. My phone's about to die. So because if your phone goes dead, that doesn't mean necessarily that something bad's happened, but you can at least mark your last known location. So in case, God forbid, whatever, you could fill in the blanks. There's a million things, but they would at least know, oh, well, she was over at her mother's house or at Target or fill in the blank. And so her phone's off the grid. That doesn't necessarily mean she's been kidnapped. She's just, her phone's dead. But we know if she didn't come home from work, or like, so for in your world, hey, I'm showing a house at 123 Sesame Street, boom, and your phone goes out, or I'm with client so-and-so, and give like a descriptor. This past summer, one of the things I had to do was I had to do sex offender checks because we have registered sex offenders, obviously, in this county. And what I would do is I'd type in the computer, obviously the address pops up, and then I would put the person's name, I would put their race, and I would put their age. Because Scott Bryson could be a 20-year-old man, it could be a 60-year-old man, right? And I could be white or black. So just having those descriptors, like I'm at house such and such with client so-and-so, and God forbid something bad were to happen, at least the cops would have a starting point.
So I gotta point out something you said there about your phone not going all the way down to nothing. My husband needs to hear that part because he makes fun of me, Scott, for keeping my phone all the way charged all the time, and I'm a little obsessive about it. But it's because of what you just said. If the phone is dead, then I don't have any way to reach somebody if I could get to it.
Yeah.
And there's a story in real estate that I know many people remember. Back in Arkansas, there was an agent by the name of Beverly Carter. She was showing a vacant house to some people. She was by herself, and they killed her and took all her stuff and left her in a shallow grave at that place. And it was not easy to figure out who it was, what had gone on, where Beverly was located. And when you start realizing where if you're going somewhere by yourself, meeting strangers, you might feel like it's overkill. But if you text and say, I'm going to this address and here's who I'm with, you might actually be able to be saved if something does go sideways because you've taken so much time off of the investigation process where people have to find you. And if you're in real estate, I'm just going to say it. All of y'all think this would never happen to you, that it happens to somebody else. But just consider how you operate and where you're operating and the fact that nobody could find you. I think about that scenario of, passing out in the grocery store because you could pass out anytime, get a blood clot, whatever. Well, if you fall down with your phone, who's to say that some other person doesn't snatch the phone up and run away, and you don't have any identifying information on your person where somebody could then find your next of, well, not next of kin, but your next resource person. And I love that you mentioned a pastor because I'm thinking that's somebody that will answer the phone. If your emergency list is made up of people who screen your calls, that's not going to do you a whole heck of a lot of good.
Yeah.
Like my kids aren't going to answer my call unless I text them and say, I need you to pick up, because they're young people who don't like to talk on the phone. But I've got to have somebody in my list. And I love that idea of writing down 5 or 10 names and keeping it separated from my phone. because I can tell you my childhood phone number. My husband had to change numbers because of work, and I cannot remember his number for the life of me. But I can tell you that my phone number on the rural route was 597-9974, and that number's been gone for 35 years. So if somebody out there is thinking, all right, I'm going to go in my work line of work, I'm going to go show a house to a person. I've pulled their ID. Now in real estate, many of our members have this service called Forewarn. Have you heard of Forewarn?
I have not.
We love it so much. It's so good. It's an app where we can pull basically a criminal background on a phone number. And if it's attached to somebody who's got a list of offenses this long, that means the realtor could say, I'm going to take my spouse with me, and we'll take my lender. I'm going to take my broker. They can be really smart, because that might be a legitimate person with a terrible background, but you just never know. So you can do a little bit of homework before you meet somebody. What would you tell an agent to do if they are pulling up to meet somebody for the first time at a vacant house, and they have, let's just say they were smart and pulled the ID for this person. They've asked for their identification before they go in the house. What would be their best practices, do you think?
Well, in addition to letting your spouse know, or your boss know, or your colleague, hey, I'm at such and such address, meet such and such person. Here, I don't know if this is going to answer your question, but if it doesn't, we'll come back to it. But this is what I wanted to say in addition to that. Just like the advice I've given people in the past, if you're in a hotel, especially ladies, right? And I'm not trying to be sexist. I'm just being honest. Like, men are bigger and stronger, just what it is. So like, if you're in a hotel and the elevator...
We can go real world here. You don't have to apologize to my listeners. We're real people here.
Well, I know. It is what it is, right? Well, with biology is biology, unless you disagree with it, like, Fauci or somebody. But it's like, if the elevator door opens up and there's a dude in the elevator and you get a bad vibe off him, you don't need to get in the elevator, and you don't know, it's a total stranger. You don't owe them an explanation. Don't get on a guilt trip based on race or anything else like that. If you get the heebie-jeebies, you got to go with your gut. I mean, even apex predators run from danger when another domineering force shows up, but we're the only mammal that feels compelled to go along to get along. And the same thing holds true, I believe, in your world. If you pull up to a house and you're getting a bad vibe off of someone, even if you don't have the data on the phone to back it up, you just get this feeling. You could just, you don't, first of all, yes, I know you want to make a sale, and yes, you think that this person is legitimately interested in the house, but that person could, in an alternative universe, they could have ulterior motives, right? They could be up to no good. And if your spidey senses go off, I say you got to go with your gut. And you could always pretend like, even if let's say you made it into the house, things seem okay in the driveway, and then you get in the house and you're like, well, it was supposed to be a man and a woman, but only the dude showed up, and he's 6'4", and he's just this big dude. And you get in there and you're like, I don't know, something just feels off. You can't explain it. He hasn't done anything wrong. It's just a feeling that you get. I would say, oh, excuse me just a second. And I would pretend like I got a phone call, and I would walk outside. Just get off the X. That's what I talk about all the time. You got to get off the X. You don't owe anybody an explanation. Your job is to go home to your family that night. If you make a sale, great. But your job is to go home, and you don't owe anybody jack crap.
I love that advice, because there's so many agents I've talked to who will tell you they've been in a scenario where they felt the hair on the back of their neck stand up, and it just didn't feel right. And they didn't know what to do, because they're so accustomed, like you said, to being nice and being kind and being, well, we're just going to make sure they didn't do anything. So I want to take a chance. And then later on, something happens. And we've seen a person from a showing will have an accomplice in the closet, and the agent didn't know about it. They've locked the back door, blocked them in the driveway. Things happen. So you do have to go with your gut. There's a whole reason we have that intuition as humans, because we have the ability to think and to reason. So you got to listen to that, because if something happens and you don't go home, you didn't make the sale either. Let's just be honest about that. But I will also say to my fellas who are my delightful viewers and listeners, y'all are at risk too, because when you're out there dealing with strangers and you're by yourself, and so often we're in vacant properties, you could be a victim too. And there was a gentleman up in Pennsylvania about 3 years ago. The people he met slit his throat and left him in his car outside this house. And because nobody knew where he was showing a property, it was a vacant property. It was like 2 days before they found him. He'd almost bled out. And that's what can happen because nobody had a way to check on him. So if you're a single person and you don't have somebody that you love in your life, and you're older and your parents are gone and your kids don't talk to you, whatever the story is, make a friend, because you should always have a friend in life that you could say, hey, just for the record, here's where I am. And your broker should be your friend if you're in real estate. And if you're a normal person, you should still have a friend. So I'm curious, in Secret Service world, you obviously learned a lot from being on alert to protect somebody else. Agents are often not on alert because they're barely protecting themselves and they're too busy trying to connect to people. What is a best practice for that idea of being aware of everything around you, just as though you're protecting the President of the United States? How did you learn how to be on alert?
Well, I think I think it comes with experience and practice. Obviously, I've done this for a long time, and obviously there's something to be said, like a rookie football player. Like, you're good because you made the NFL, but you're still a rookie, so you just don't know all the nuance type stuff. But you have to. I think reading body language is key, and that just takes practice. But you guys are interacting with people. It should be pretty easy for you guys because you interact with so many people on a daily basis. Like, anybody that has a public service job, teachers are interacting with students, and sales people are interacting with people, and you guys are interacting with people. So, I mean, I think you guys would be pretty adept at picking up on body language. And for me, it's always the eyes. Now, I want to be very careful about this because it's a two-part thing. So to me, the eyes tell the story. You can just see there's something about the person's eyes. Now, I don't know what's in their brain, and I don't know what's in someone's heart. I'm not trying to pretend like I'm a psychic or something weird like that. But you can tell a lot by looking at a person's facial expressions and the nonverbal cues that they give. You kind of gave me a couple of minutes ago when I was trying to get my phone set up. It's like an aggressive looking stance, a relaxed posture, clenched jaw, sweaty. Like, if it's 50 degrees outside, it feels really nice. They probably shouldn't be sweating. I mean, maybe they're nervous about something. You know what I mean? And if it's 85 degrees outside, they probably should be wearing a bigger, heavy coat because it's not cold at all. Are they hiding something? So it's like it's clothing. Is the clothing appropriate for the weather? Is their body language appropriate for the situation? If you're selling if you're trying to show a house, the person should be pretty happy and relaxed. Like, oh my gosh, people who are buying houses are going to buy houses. It's just a matter of which one, right? It's not like you're going to buy a house. If you're for real, you're going to buy one. It's just a matter of when. So you should be in a happy mood or relaxed or whatever. But like if they're sweating or clenching their jaw or their eyes, that's a problem. Now, once you get past the cues, for me, I start with the face and I try to read the person's face, and then I kind of do the body language thing. But just understand that these things right here, that's what will do the damage to you, right? Whether they have a weapon of some type or whether it's just this, you've got to watch their hands. Their hands, after you've kind of made an initial assessment, you're like, okay, something's a little off. Then what you got to do right now is you've got to watch their hands. Their hands will kill you. It's not the person's face or their hips or their feet or their shoulders. It's their hands. You have to watch the hands. And then, I used to work for a guy who, when I was on our counter assault team for 3 years, so basically like SWAT team. And Tony was awesome. He was my boss. God rest his soul. He's not with us anymore. But he would say, and I didn't know this at first because I was brand new. I didn't know what was going on. He said, Scott, you know who your best friend is? And I'm like, nope. He said, distance. So if you're in a gunfight or any type of altercation, distance is your best friend. Now, in police terms, you want to get the cover and all this other weird stuff that we're not talking about. But like, distance is your friend. Okay. So I would say watch their faces, get a read on that. Then watch the hands. That's what's going to hurt you. And then you gotta get some separation.
I love that advice. I'm sitting here thinking about the training that I do with my sidearm, and the further away I am from the target, the less accurate I am. And so obviously somebody is much safer if they are at a distance from me than if they are close up. And it's the same thing when I'm interacting with strangers, although my tendency is to hug everybody within reachable distance. That's not always a good business practice. So I love that concept of distance, and that's really smart to think about. And by the way, y'all, if you want to follow somebody on the body language stuff, look up Janine Driver. She's brilliant. She does some of the best trainings, and there's lots of videos out there of her, and she's just a delightful human. So follow Janine Driver. You can learn a lot about body language. But when you mentioned the eyes, I got so tickled because when I'm looking at Instagram reels, or if I go onto the TikTok, there's a certain segment of the public that gets very unhappy about things, and you can always tell the crazy people because of their eyes. They're wildly bugged out and they're kind of jumping all over the place, and you're like, I think you need to maybe don't drink as much caffeine and maybe go outside and walk barefoot in the grass for a minute and calm down, because there is a dead giveaway. And for me, it's when they can't make eye contact. If they're looking everywhere but at me, that makes me think there's something going on here. Is that an accurate representation of shady people?
No, it's perfect. And then one other thing I wanted to touch on too that I didn't say, that's absolutely right, is some people, like some of my Italian friends, I tease them on, like, if I put handcuffs on you, you couldn't talk, because people would talk with their hands, right? But what they'll do is they'll try to distract you they'll like twist their head and point over here, and then try to divert your attention, and then they'll, sucker punch you or whatever. So you have to really, like, if we're talking, like if we were in the same room right now, we're having a conversation just like we are, and we're kind of face to face. If all of a sudden I turn away and I'm sort of I call it blading yourself. You've probably heard the guys talking about that with a firearm. You blade yourself away, your firearm away from the guy. Well, what they're going to do is they're going to take a step back. And most people, not all, but most people are right hand dominant, right? So they're going to drop that right foot, and they're going to, because you're already sort of squared up, and then they're going to drop that right foot, and then that's going to give them leverage and momentum. And that's if you're talking to someone and you're starting to get some of these cues, and you notice they sort of shift, and their weight shifts backwards and sort of turns away up, not quite 45, but going more toward a 45-degree angle, they might be getting ready to punch you.
I would never have thought about that, because women don't usually do fist fights and hand-to-hand combat, but I should be paying attention to all those clues. So I will do better. Well, and by the way, y'all, go ahead.
No, I just want to say this is a little graphic, and I don't want it to be, but like, it is what it is. So what I'm trying to do is just make people aware. I'm not trying to make people afraid, just trying to give some tools in the toolbox. But like, if a man's going to rape a woman, it's not romantic. It's not kind. He'll knock your teeth out. So if that's the case, if they're going to do that to rape you, what do you think they'll do to kill you or steal? Same thing.
Well, I think people get really confused about rape, because since it is a violent act that involves intimate areas, they think it's got something to do with sex and intimacy, and it does not. Rape is a violent assault, and it is all about power and control. And so you have to remember that if you're trying to get out of those situations, there is nothing soft about it. And I wish more people understood it, because for years, women have been treated like it. They may have brought it on themselves, the short skirt thing. Any of that crap is not true. It is a violent assault, no different than any other kind of violence, except that it is different because it hits you different. But anyway, I'm glad you mentioned that, because we do get into the scenarios that we don't know how to get out of, and being a people pleaser, let's just go ahead and talk about it, since we're talking about violent sexual assault, violent rape. How does a woman get out of a situation where a man is using his size and his heft to try and go that route? Is it the old squeeze, twist, and pull that we learned back in high school? Is it the heel of the hand up the base of the nose? That's what I learned from my ex-boyfriend who was in the Marine Corps. He told me to use the base of my hand and drive up the nose. And he taught me how. We practiced on a big boxing bag, And he was a very nice man to teach me that, although I did not marry him. He married somebody delightful. So, it's good to see your exes laying with good people. But is that a good thing to do if you're being attacked and the squeeze, twist, and pull? What's the number one way you tell a woman to get out of that mess besides hollering?
Yeah, exactly. Voice is obviously, use your voice if you can, scream bloody murder. But if no one's around, if you're in a house, they're not going to hear. But definitely use your voice. But once the voice thing is over and it's like it's fight or flight, and you can't fight because he's got you, you're going to have to be extremely violent very quickly. You need to, all you need is you just need a little break. You just need a break in contact so you can run, right? Because you're not there. You're not an MMA fighter. You're not in it to win it. It's the same. It's the same principle. When I carry my gun off duty, I don't carry a spare magazine. Some of my friends are like, "Why don't you carry a spare magazine?" Because I'm not looking to get into a gunfight, dude. I'm looking to escape so I can get off the X and call 911. I'm a cop, but I ain't working. I'm trying to get my wife safe, my kids, whatever, right? So I'm not looking to fight. Same thing in a physical situation. If a man's grabbing you, your fine motor skills are going to go out the window. You're going to get tunnel vision. So you're going to have to use gross motor skills. Just to be perfectly blunt, hit him in the balls. I don't care how big you are. You can be Dwayne Johnson. And I know women can't understand that. My wife's always says, "Well, how does that hurt?" I don't know. It just hurts really bad is all I can tell you. And so don't be afraid to just go there first if you can. If he comes up from behind you, like a lot of you ladies probably wear nice shoes and you got a little, I don't know, wear stilettos, but you got a 2 or 3 inch heel. Take your heel and jab it right in his foot, because it's like when you jump in a pool of water and it's cold, you're going to have that reflex. You're going to gasp. You can't control it. It's going to hurt. So if you take your heel and you stomp on his foot, that crap's going to hurt. Or you can you can scrape his shin, anything like that. You're probably not going to break free up here if he's a big, strong guy. So you go to the lower extremities, go to the groin, go to the genitals first, stomp on his foot, hit his, scrape his, the shin bone hurts, obviously pretty bad. If he's behind you, take your head and headbutt him as hard as you can. Try to knock his teeth out or try to bust his nose. If you get hit in the nose, that hurts. Your eye's going to water and you get stunned. I don't care how strong you are. So take your head and just ram it back and do it 2 or 3 times. It's probably going to hurt your head too, but your skull is very hard and your adrenaline's going to be full. So it's not going to hurt you until later. You got to get the heck out of there, because if he's doing that, you have to assume the worst. You have to be extremely violent and you have to do it right now.
I love that advice, that it's not about winning. I never thought about it in those terms before, where you don't have to win and knock him out. You just have to escape, or as you say, get off the X. And that's what you have to do. And to a friend of mine who I know watches my show, and I know she is a rape survivor, she thought that by being more compliant, he would get done faster and she would be safe, because she didn't want to get hurt more. She got hurt really badly. And I'm sure that looking back, there's all these what ifs and what ifs. I just don't think you're going to have as many what ifs if you make every possible effort to get away and, like you said, be as violent as you can, because it's your health and your mental wellness and at stake here. All right, so since that's a kind of a dark angle, let's go to something else. And I know you can't tell me who you've protected, because that would go against all of your NDAs and confidentiality agreements. But in the process of being Secret Service, first of all, how did you go to Secret Service from being a regular Concord policeman? Because I know that Keith Urey probably wishes he'd done that instead of staying in Concord Police all these years until he retired. But Keith's going to get into real estate now because Nina Tucker was his aunt, so he doesn't have any choice. But hey, Keith, so why did you go from Concord to the Secret Service, and what was the driver behind that, and what was the best part of that experience?
Yeah, like I said, I have an education degree. I thought I was going to be a high school football coach, but then about my sophomore year in college, I met a Secret Service agent, which is very rare. It's like a unicorn. You hear about him, but you never see him. And I met this guy named Bob Roberts, J.B. Roberts, his son. Just awesome dude. And I always thought like an FBI agent or Secret Service agent would just be arrogant and too cool for school and not talk to me. I was a 20-year-old sophomore in high school or college, and just couldn't have been nicer, down to earth, super nice. And we just started talking about it. He had protected the president. At that time, it had been George H.W. Bush, President 41. We lovingly refer to the presidents as 41 and 43 when we're talking about George Bush's, because you don't say it's
Is
too
that
much.
where it came from?
Yeah.
Because we call it 47 and 45. It came from Secret Service?
Well, yeah, it kind of started like a little inside joke because George H.W. Bush, George Herbert Walker Bush, that's a mouthful, that's 41. And then George W. Bush, his son, was 43. So they all had little hats. When they would play golf and stuff, he had a hat that said 43, and his dad had one that said 41. So that's just kind of how it started. Yeah. It's not meant to be disrespectful. It was kind of fun. They said it, so we said it too. It was kind of funny. Yeah, and so Bob was just super cool, and he said, "Leigh, man, Secret Service is very small. We're very diverse. You don't have to have a specific degree. Stay the course and get out and get some experience." So I did. So I finished up at App, got my teaching degree, taught school for a short time, knowing that I didn't really want to do that. I knew that the job would be super hard to get. This was in the 90s, and Bill Clinton was in office, so EEO was a big thing. And, of course, based on what you see right here, I didn't fit their demographics and or their lifestyle. So it took a while for me to get a job. 2.5 years I actually took to get the job. And so in the process, I just didn't really want to work. If I'm being honest, I just didn't want to work in a town or the county where I had gone to high school. I just didn't want to arrest people I went to high school with, which is what I ended up doing. I wanted to be a trooper or Charlotte or something like that. I just wanted to kind of get away from, being around here. And so, but I was fortunate enough to get hired at Concord. I worked there for 2 years. It was great, good experience, a lot of good experience down there. And then I went to the service. It took 2.5 years to get on. The process was super long, very, very thorough, and which is kind of funny because I was pretty squeaky clean, a little bit of I was an athlete, but it's kind of like a stick in the mud, never done drugs. I hadn't had, at that point, I'd never even drank alcohol. I made up for lost time, full disclosure, at the tail end of college. I definitely made up for some lost time at the end of college. But like, I had never drank. I didn't smoke. I liked cars and I liked sports. And so, but anyway, they're very thorough, and it took 2.5 years. And I started in the Charlotte field office, which was really great because I didn't have to move. And we started we planned it out because we're like, okay, we're going to move at some point, so let's have the kids while we have help. So we had our 3 babies pretty quickly, but my mom and dad were about 15 minutes away. Jean was about 20 minutes away, so it was just perfect. And then when the kids were a couple years old, I think Lane was getting ready to go into, kindergarten, and I got transferred to the president's detail. And so that was in March of 2003. So I went to D.C., and I did that for almost 6 years. And from there, I was very fortunate. I got transferred overseas. I got stationed in our London office, which we worked out of the American Embassy in London. That was an amazing experience for the family. And
wait a minute. Why does Secret Service have a London office?
Well, we're strategically placed around the world. Of course, now everything's gone cyber, so the cyber crimes are, but it's more for like a liaison type role. So much going on in the world with politics, like, former presidents, when they first get out, especially, they're on their speaking circuits, right? And then, of course, like, they're always going places. And London is just kind of centrally located. We have several offices throughout the world. Where Secret Service is very small, by the way. FBI has probably got 15,000 or 20,000 agents. I think Secret Service has like 3,000 or 3,500 guys. But our offices are like, we have Paris, London, Rome, Frankfurt. They're just sort of strategically placed around the world because there's so much protection going on all the time, especially for like sitting presidents. So like when a president needs to go somewhere, the detail is based in D.C. and they don't have any knowledge of that area. So we kind of link up with them and support that. And it's more of a liaison role. It was great.
It's so cool. Okay, so anyway, so you get into Secret Service and you're moving around into these field offices. Did you ever get to work with Dan Bongino, by the way?
I did. Yep.
Is he a decent man? Because I feel like he is from what I've watched, but I don't know him. Is he decent?
He's great. Dan good. And I were about, you want a funny story about Dan?
Yes, I do.
Okay. He's awesome. Dan was my partner. I didn't know Dan from Adam. Here I was, this little country bumpkin coming up from North Carolina, and Dan's the New York field office guy, and we were doing this zone protection stuff. So like, kind of, if you're familiar with Manhattan, it's very easy to navigate, much easier than DC. It's a grid. It's east and west and north.
Yes.
That's super easy. And so we had a couple blocks that we were responsible for protective intelligence. And so Dan and I were working, and of course they had the street shut down because motorcades and stuff. And people in New York can tend to be obnoxious from time to time. And this guy was on one of those 10-speed bikes, and he was delivering, looked like probably, paperwork for an architect or whatever. And he just was not, abiding by the law. And Dan yelled at him, and of course he yelled back, which didn't go well for him, because Mr. Bongino proceeded to take his forearm and basically sickle him off the bicycle. It was amazing. And I was like, oh, I guess that's how they police up here, because we wouldn't do that down where I'm from. But he jerked a knot in that guy's butt real quick. And of course he let it go. But I was like, welcome to New York.
Well, I mean, maybe if we did police like that in Charlotte, we wouldn't have nearly the problems that we have. I mean, maybe there's something to be said for.
Oh, definitely. It's called broken windows policing. Rudy Giuliani did that in the 90s. That's how he cleaned up all the stuff. It's called broken window policing. It worked.
I hope it comes back. I think we're seeing a great result in Washington, D.C. right now.
Oh, yeah.
And Charlotte's going to have to do something. I mean, we shouldn't be in the national news for people who can't ride public transit without getting killed. I mean, it's, all there's really no joking about it. I really think people have lost sight of the fact that public safety matters. And if it's not you because it happened to somebody else, we shouldn't want it to happen to anybody else either. I mean,
it's ridiculous.
We have to have some kind of basic behavior in our world to keep people in a good space. And so that means I got to ask you, you've mentioned you were a school teacher. In the safety space that we're in right now, a lot of our public school teachers are not safe in the classroom because these kids, I like to say that some of them are feral. I don't think they were raised by people who had guardrails for them and had an expectation of behavior. The teachers, if they call out the kids get aggressive. We've all seen the videos. If the administration calls the parents take the kids' side, which you and I didn't grow up like that. If we had a call to go home, there's no way on the planet that our parents would have taken our side over the administration and the teachers in the school. So if somebody is a public school teacher in 20 and 25, and they're working with a challenged high school that's got lots of challenging behaviors, and let's just say they're working with a high school class, how does a teacher keep themselves safe so that they can get these kids to absorb some of the knowledge that obviously they desperately need? You got any advice for the education group?
Well, that's a really good question. It's a very tough. I don't think there's a good answer. I think it starts at home. You know that. You just alluded to that. I mean, we all know that the nuclear family has been destroyed for the most part, a lot of communities, and they're not getting the structure at home that they need. And so these teachers, my daughter's actually, she's a kindergarten teacher, so she's not too bad. But, Elizabeth just started working part-time. I don't know if you know this, but she just started working part-time at local high school, teaching a marketing class or entrepreneur class in the mornings. And, I'm like, I hate to say, this kind of goes against every grain in my fiber, because I don't run from problems. I don't like drama. I don't look for trouble, but I certainly don't shy away from it. But honestly, just leave. Just get out of just leave. It's not worth it. Forget your job. You're going to lose your job anyway because you're guilty until proven innocent, which is ridiculous. But you're going to get yourself hurt. Just walk out.
In a rough classroom environment, you might tell a teacher just to walk out of the classroom and go get a school resource officer. But we are wildly understaffed on that, even in North Carolina, which has them in the classroom. One of my friends is a school resource officer at a high school, and he's got 20 bathrooms on that campus. So if he gets a phone call from one bathroom where there's trouble brewing, by the time he gets over there, they've dispersed and gone somewhere else because they're way too crafty now. Since we've got to do something to get our young people to understand that we have basic rules, basic morals as a society. And I think we're losing that edge right now, and it's hurting our young people.
Oh yeah, they've lost all sense of reality. They don't even know how to communicate with each other. These silly phones, all they do is text each other. They could be in the same room, they don't even have a conversation. So they don't have. I think they've lost, and maybe never even. Some of them never even had like they don't have self-respect or self-dignity, so they don't have it for other people. They don't even understand what that means.
Oh, that's a really good way to put it. And I think you're right, because if they believed in themselves, they would know they don't have to be the lowest common denominator, the lowest version of themselves. And maybe that's where our teachers can find that positive impact again. I don't know. I do worry about our
Yeah,
educational faculty because they are at risk in the classroom right now.
they are.
So they can't be armed. You only have one door for egress unless you're in elementary school with exterior doors. What do you recommend as far as setting expectations? I'm sure you had to set a room up as Secret Service and tell maybe the press, here's how we're going to behave here. Were you ever in a space where you had to give instructions? And is there something you would advise Elizabeth to say when she goes to teach that entrepreneur class?
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head with the whole ingress and egress thing. You know, she's got one door in and one door out. So and I'm not gonna give away any like super secret tradecraft secrets here, but it's not rocket science. You're going to bring the protectee in one way. You're going to bring the general public in one way. You're going to bring the press in another way, right? You're not going to have these intersecting lines of, crossing, and there's always usually, rope and stanchion or bike rack. And the thing about that stuff is that's all well and good, but it's for like when we were building this house a few years ago, we had a gate up, and Elizabeth was like, well, that's not going to stop anybody. I said, no, that's just for the honest people. That's just to keep the looky-loos off my property. If you want in, you're getting in. And the same thing there. It's like rope and stanchion or even bike rack. It's only going to do so much. But, it's funny because we were having this conversation earlier today because she knew I was coming on your show, and she thought we might be talking about some of the realtor stuff that you had mentioned earlier, which she was right. And I told her, one of the things I told the school secretary at my old school, and I told my wife to do it today. I said, this is going to seem weird, but worst case, we're talking worst case. Take a can of Campbell's tomato soup or a can of corn. That's a baseball term. A can of corn or a can of green beans or whatever, and put that sucker in your drawer. Now you're only going to get one shot, but if what's hitting the fan, you can go David and Goliath on somebody, and you can throw that sucker at them. And if you're lucky, you'll knock them upside the head and then have a chance to get out. Now that's obviously an attack, right? Someone's coming at you with a gun or a knife or something, or even a big kid's trying to assault you. At that point in time, the gloves are off. And you got to do what you have to do to survive. The problem is there's only one way in, one way out. And that's a loser.
So you have to keep a clear pathway to the door, obviously, and make sure you've got nothing in your way while you're teaching that class would make sense to me.
Yep.
I love the idea of a can of soup or vegetables. We tell realtors to keep a can of wasp spray in the car for the ones that don't feel comfortable carrying a weapon. A can of wasp spray is actually a good thing. You might have a nest at a house that you're working on, but you also can spray it in somebody's eyes just long enough to get away. And
true story on that. This happened to me as a young cop. We went to a domestic one night, and the reason I want to tell the story is because it works, because you just brought up a great point. Went to a domestic. We're in this house all the time. Two young kids, probably like a 4-year-old and 8-year-old boy, cute little boys, real bad part of town. And the mom and dad were always getting into it. Well, we get there one night, and there was 4 or 5 of us there. And the mom was chasing the dad around the kitchen table with a knife. And he had a can of wasp spray, big can of Raid spraying on her to keep her away from him. And it was working. It was working until we got there. So it does work. And that's great advice. That's thinking outside the box. That's great.
Well, and as I've mentioned to you before, we've talked about if you're going to carry a weapon like a firearm, You have to be trained with it. Do not carry one if you don't know what to do with it. That's when you have a can of wasp spray, because if you have one, you have to be willing to use it. And if you're willing to use it, you have to be willing to defend yourself in a court of law over everything that went down. And so if you're thinking about all of the possible consequences, you should be trained. And I'm sitting here thinking, if I have a can of tomato soup, I had better go outside and practice throwing it, because I'm retired from softball and I'm a sidearm anyway. And so if I have that can and I can't throw it correctly, I'm going to tick off the person who's coming at me. And that could be worse for me than if I'm properly trained. So I guess I'll take the bow and arrow target in the yard and I'll start chucking cans of corn at it and see what happens.
Yeah.
It'd be good for my things. I can get rid of those by chucking vegetable cans. It'd be a new workout.
And I've said this on some of my videos before too, as far as like, we're going to apply it to the classroom right now, but like when you're traveling, you go through TSA, the wonderful people at TSA who are highly trained. Some people are geologists and have pet rock collections. So who's to say that you don't have a pet rock that you need to take with you everywhere? And you could have this big, stone, river rock, smooth stone, and you could paint it green and make it into a little frog or whatever you want to do for your paperweight. And you know what? You can throw that sucker at somebody too. There's all kinds of ideas. You know what I mean? If you're just willing to think about it and slow down. We talked about it a while ago, just slowing down and kind of thinking outside the box a little bit. And it's a little unorthodox, but it works.
Well, since you mentioned that nice smooth stone, I'm just thinking about the ESPN Ocho's been showing the strangest athletic competitions. And I watched the stone throwing, skipping competition that was happening up in Pennsylvania. And I hate to admit that I sat there and watched it for 30 minutes, watching stones skip across the water. So I'm picturing that in my carry-on bag, and I imagine that I'll have to answer questions about it, because I don't really know how they test people for those jobs, but I just have to hope that they're doing it to the best of their ability, I guess. So, Scott, if anybody wants to follow you, to find out more about your show, to ask you questions, learn from you, what is the best way for them to reach out? Is it through your Instagram account to follow that, to sign up for podcast episodes? Where do you want people to go to find you?
Yeah, Scott Bryson, BTS is just short for Beyond the Service. On Instagram is a great way, because then if you follow me or whatever, then you can DM me and all that good stuff. I spend most of my time on Instagram. Then email is another great way. It's Scott Bryson, and that's BRYSON, Scott Bryson Biz, BIZ, @gmail.com. You can always email me. I've been invited to a couple of things to give speeches. I spoke last week at our church to the women's group. I've been invited to go to a couple of different colleges coming up in the next year to speak on leadership and safety and the things that we kind of talked about tonight. So if you're interested in any of that stuff, hit me up on Instagram or email or anything like that. It'd be great.
And don't say anything ugly, and don't be creepers, because his son is looking at these messages, y'all. So be the good, wholesome audience that you've always been. And make sure you say something down in the comments, maybe something that you've picked up or something that has hit you sideways, or maybe you could ask a question. Scott will be alerted to those, and maybe you'll see your conundrum addressed in one of his Instagram videos in the future. Scott, I'm so grateful that you're able to come on the show and give us some good counsel and ways to think about things so that people can live a little safer life out there until we can get things better as a society. And we know that's not going to happen until Jesus comes, but that's fine. So if y'all need to know the Lord, you can talk to me or you can talk to Scott, and we'll be glad to help you out. And then in the meantime, make sure that you've hit the bell to subscribe, say thank you to Scott, and we'll be here to see you next time. Thank you for coming on the show.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for having me.
Well, friends, if that episode made you laugh, think, or shout, "Oh, gosh, dang," go ahead and smash that like button, hit subscribe, and turn on that little tiny bell so you don't miss the next round of Real Talk with Leigh Brown. You can also find me on your favorite podcast app, so whether you're in the car, at the gym, or dodging your inbox, I've got you covered. And hey, if you've got a story too wild to keep to yourself, send me a message, because you just might be the perfect next guest. Thanks for hanging out with me. I'll see you next time right here where real estate gets real.